Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today we're continuing the top 100 games of all time as of 2023. We're going to be going through numbers 90 through 81 today. As usual, I'll have links and timestamps, well, just timestamps. I'll have timestamps to everything down below, and if you want to see the list criteria, things around how this list is formed, certain rules, stuff like that, that's going to be at the beginning of the last video, which will all be part of a playlist or whatnot, so you can find that easily enough. We're going to be doing these videos every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday until the list is complete, and with that, we're going to start this off in a second. Just a quick note or reminder that earlier this week I put up a video about supporting the channel, including a giveaway for an all-in Oathsworn, an all-in Master of the Universe, and an all-in Zombicide Undead or Alive. There's giveaway details for those as well. Please go ahead and check those out. But with that, let's go ahead and start off with number 90. Number 90 is going to be Tanares Adventures, is at my number 90 game of all time. Now I want to say two things about this game before we dive into what this game is. The first thing I'm going to say is that, just as a disclaimer worth noting, that Tanares Adventures Jagori Games, they have done paid content on this game on the channel, so there's a whole continued campaign playthrough that I'm engaged with and I'm going through, so please understand that because it is in the top 100. Also, this actually represents a huge drop from where it was in past years, which is an interesting conversation in and of itself, which I'm going to go ahead and go on a tangent on before we even talk about Tanares Adventures. Tanares Adventures, Arena of the Contest, I bundle those two together. Those two I consider the same general game, but those games, that last year I want to say was like my number 25, 26. It was really high up, relatively speaking, last year, and this year dropping to 90 represents a big drop, but that's also because I've put like 150, 160 hours into this game over this year, and as much as I do like, and as much as I do recommend it, as much as it's still my number 90, at a certain point when you put so much time into a game, sometimes some of the things that you want to see more of, you've seen that more of, and that can take away from just how much you enjoy it. This game has dropped because of how much time I've spent in it, and this is a good time to tell you that I'll save you the time, the trouble, the effort, the energy, but Frosthaven and Gloomhaven are not in my top 100. Gloomhaven in particular was my number 3 game of all time last year, which is insane to me. But that was at a point when I had put in like 60, 70 hours, and I appreciated it, I loved it, I thought it was great, and I still do. But I'm 250 hours into Gloomhaven and Frosthaven. Between the two of them, between Jaws, Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, I might be like 300 hours into that system, and as much as I still appreciate it and still recommend it, there's an interesting and different conversation around how much time is a game good for, and how does it affect its ranking. I mean, if a game I put 300 hours into, shouldn't it be in my top 100? And the answer is no, because I do my top 100 based on now, based on where I am, based on how I want to play those things right now. And frankly, I don't mind playing more Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, and Crimson Scales and all those things, but if I didn't play them again, I'd be fine with that because I spend so much time in those worlds. Sometimes games, it's worth noting, it's worth addressing, by the way, if you as a viewer are wondering what happened to Gloomhaven, well, 300 hours in, and it's, not as enduring as it was at 100 hours in, but it's still a good game that I recommend. The same is true of Tanares Adventures. I think it's an excellent system. I fell in love with this system. Arena of the Contest is one of the first games I ever reviewed on the channel because there's so much intricacy to the gameplay, to the way you merge characters and utilize their abilities to try to take down either other players in PvP mode, or alternatively going through the campaign mode, the cooperative mode, to actually go ahead and engage with a bunch of adventures as you figure out how to take down the enemies, utilizing the combat system against the enemies as efficiently as possible. There's a lot going on for the intricacies of this game, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I do. I also think that any game system that once you're 160 hours into it might drop a bit in terms of just how much appeal there is to continue playing it. That's going to be my number 90, Tanares Adventures. My number 89 is going to be, are we up to 89? 89. My number 89 is going to be Caesar Sees Rome in 20 minutes. This is going to be coming to you from PSC Games, from Paolo Mori. This is a 20-minute back and forth of trying to basically, well, seize the map. You're going to have this map over here, and you're trying to go ahead and take control of these areas, but you're placing your tokens down to spots that are always between two areas. The interplay, the nuance of how you place down a token, of how it resolves in both sides of the map board, of how it affects two things at once, and how you can slowly close off areas. To me, this is an implementation. This is the next game in Blitzkrieg, in the line of Blitzkrieg, sees whatever, World War II in 20 minutes, and to me, this one does it better. This is my favorite of the series. They currently have Caesar, Blitzkrieg, and Dogfight. Dogfight is good, it's variable. Blitzkrieg is really good, and Caesar to me is the best one there is. This is my number 89 game of all time. Coming in at my number 88, we have Resident Evil, the board game, specifically Resident Evil, the board game. Meaning there's 3 games in this series. There's Resident Evil 2, there's Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil, the board game, and then they will have Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil, the board game is my favorite in this series. I haven't played 2, I think 3 is very good, but 3 to me is just a worse version of 4. I'd show you the back of the box in this one, but there's not a lot to really show over here. But this is going to be this to me is the game that Nemesis is for other people. I think Nemesis is a good game system, but it's delivered highs and lows for me, and Resident Evil to me delivers that kind of game experience, but just more consistently. Not the same highs, not the same lows, just more consistently good as far as what it does. But in the game, you're operating with your agents from the video game, you're exploring a map, uncovering and developing it as you go, and you're engaging with these various enemies, but you start off the game with having nowhere near enough resources or ammunition to actually deal with the enemies effectively. You go ahead and have a handful of bullets and you only hit on like a 5 or 6, or is it even a 6? It's been a while since I last played it, but you only hit infrequently on those. I guess it depends on the gun, it depends on the weapon you're using. But you're going to be rolling dice to try to actually hit and hoping for the best, but understanding you're going to miss just as often, or you're going to push back the enemies rather than actually killing them, and that means you're conservatively trying to plan around how to deal with a bunch of people who you can't really kill, which changes the entire way that you approach the game. It changes the entire way you approach the engine. That's going to be Resident Evil the board game. I think it's absolutely fantastic, a great game, my number 88 of all time. My number 87, and this is a heavy box, so bear with me over here. My number 87 is Quodd Heroes. Oh my gosh. I like Quodd Heroes more than I have any reasonable expectation of liking. I can't hold this up to you. I mean, I'm gonna try to hold this up. This is a heavy box. I don't want to turn it upside down. Inside there's like a custom insert. There's things. I guess it probably could survive to being turned upside down. Let's go ahead and show you some stuff over here. But in Quodd Heroes, you're basically tumbling these little heroes along the board. You're going to be tumbling from location to location, trying to deal with a variety of goals in the game, because there's a bunch of goals. There's ways to play it solo, cooperatively, competitively, racing. You know, there's a whole bunch of things you can do in the game system. But the game system gives you a tons of powers and abilities and programming to all combine to a delightful experience that is a mess and a hard-to-table game. Ignore that. It's a hard-to-table game as far as how, well, easy it is to get to the table, but part of the reason it's here is because it's just so much fun. I don't play Quodd Heroes as much as I'd like to, nowhere near as much as I'd like to, but when I do play it, it gives me one of the better gaming experiences that I have. I'm excited for the fact that there is a second edition coming. I don't know when it's coming. It was on crowdfunding last year, but it will be coming at some point. It's a little easier, a little more streamlined, some, you know, pre-painted miniatures, a full campaign solo book to go through. There's a lot of good things about the game, but to me, Quodd Heroes is arguably the best programming game. Mechs vs. Minions does have something, but honestly, Mechs vs. Minions is on my shelf, but it's not on my top 100, so I think I'm going to go ahead and say Quodd Heroes, to me, is the best programming game I've played, and it's a delightful experience with powers and abilities galore, and I highly recommend it. Coming in at number 86, we have Ragnarocks from Grey Fox Games. And Ragnarocks is charming. This is an easy game to play. You want to knock out like 7 games of Ragnarocks in half an hour, you can do so. Ragnarocks to me is an iteration of Santorini, which, again, spoilers, not on this list. Santorini is just outside my top 100, versus Ragnarocks broke its way in. And again, to be fair to Santorini, I've played that game like 70, 80 times. I've played Ragnarocks, honestly, probably close to 70, 80. The speed at which you can knock out, the game of Santorini might take you like, 20 minutes. A game of Ragnarocks might take you like 6 minutes, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. I generally play this game like, 5 to 6 times per sitting, effectively. I sit down, knock out a bunch of games, and then move back, move on. Ragnarok's is a delightful experience of, well, abstract strategy. You're basically moving these Vikings around the board, trying to take control of areas as you move things around. It's a game system I've seen before in terms of similarities to other systems. Battleship is often compared to. I've never played Battleship. Hey, That's My Fish I would compare it to. I'd compare it to Terra Nova as well. There are a bunch of games that have these same gameplay mechanisms of Ragnarok's, but what Ragnarok's does well is what Santorini did well, which they introduce asymmetric abilities to the core game system. So it's a bunch of abstract rules, a simple enough game, but then you constantly have asymmetric abilities where you take a god power, and boom, suddenly you're playing the game with a slight difference to how you would normally play it. That small shift, to me, keeps the game system fresh. It takes a game system that is clean, simple, and easy, and it gives you that incentive to play it 7 times in a row, because technically you're playing 7 different games in a row. Or you take this god, I'll take that god, and then at the end, let's swap and see if they felt unbalanced, or see if it's about who plays them better. There's so much you can do within the system. I think it's clean, I think it's fast, I think it's easy to play. Ragnarok's is my number 86 game of all time. My number 85 is going to be Carson City, a game that has held up. It's dropped a bit on this list, but a game that has held up by the very fact that it's still here. Carson City from Quodd Games, they just recently had a reprint campaign for the first time in years, and I played this a long time ago. My friend's birthday, went over to his house, he had just gotten Carson City, he wanted to play it, we sat down, we played it, and then that night I was online looking for deluxe versions of the game to try to hunt down because it was so much fun. And this is one of those games that I definitely rank higher than the average person. I think on BGG it's like like a 7.2, 7.3, and for me, it is a great game. It's a 4.5 out of 5. I think it's an excellent experience. Carson City is a worker placement game, but a worker placement competitive game. You are placing down workers, but the trick of the game is that as you place down a worker, anyone can go there. Just if multiple people go there, there'll be a shootout. The game is a thematic Western. There'll be a shootout, and only one person will actually get the action. The other person will get their workers back as extra workers for a next round, so it's not a total loss, but a worker next round is not as good as a worker this round because it's only a 4-round game. You have less time to benefit from what you're trying to do, and so there's a constant trade-off of trying to get the things you want, and that constant stalemate, that constant incentive of how much combat is worthwhile, how much combat do you want to engage in, are you willing to take the risk that you will or won't win, how much do you want to invest in combat, which is again resources, to go ahead and take things away from other people, which denies them resources. There's a constant trade-off as far as how you operate, but the game state isn't so punishing to be, well, not enjoyable. It's fun, it's appealing, there's a ton of variety through expansions and characters and everything in this box. Carson City is a game that I have not grown quite sick of yet. Coming in at my number 84. My number 84, again a game that has dropped, not that much from last year actually, but from previous years. This used to be a game that was always in my top 20, and then last year it dropped, and this year it's around the same. But that's going to be Kemet, Blood and Sand, coming in at number 84. As usual, a good time to remind people that any game in the top 100 is still a game being picked from like hundreds and hundreds, thousands of games that I've played over the years. These are still the quote-unquote cream of the crop, at least according to my opinion, but Kemet, while it is still, 80, it used to be a top 20 game for me all the time. This is another game that, ironically, I played with the same friend who showed me Carson City, introduced me to Kemet back in the day, but Kemet is one that I absolutely love. It's part of the Cyclades, Innis, and Kemet trilogy from Matago, but Cyclades is being reprinted by a different company now, so that will be different eventually. But Kemet is an area control game with powers and abilities. It did see a drop-off for me as Blood Rage came out. Blood Rage, to me, gave me the same feelings that Kemet did, but in a system that I thought was slightly better, but they felt similar enough that it kind of took each other's place. And that's why Kemet did see a big drop-off eventually over time, despite me loving the game system. But it's still a system I love. It's still a game I want to play. It's still a tremendously good experience as far as the sheer mixing of powers and abilities. And actually, as of the time of filming this video, just like yesterday on Instagram, I saw Matago teasing something coming in Kemet in 2024. So apparently there's more Kemet content coming, which we knew if you got Blood and Sands because of the way the map is built. There's room for more stuff, but there's going to be more Kemet coming, it seems like. But Kemet is effectively powers and abilities galore. The base game starts off with 3 sets of pyramid, each pyramid giving you a different lane, economy, defense, and attack, and you're trying to invest in all different aspects because everything in the game is super powerful. But the game is all about trying to control the temples and trying to win combats to get you to precious 10 victory points in the game system. And then there's expansions. There's 2 expansions currently as far as new pyramid tiles. There's a full green suite of tiles that I actually haven't even played with yet. I haven't played with the new tiles yet. I've read the rules for them. I never played with those green tiles. And then there's the black tiles over there that are going to give you a combination. The green tiles more deal with sacrifice. The black tiles deal with more just a general hodgepodge of economy, attack, and defense all in one. But it's a fantastic game full of powers and abilities. It can be overwhelming at first, but the game experience it delivers is just incredibly well done. That's going to be Kemet, Blood and Sand, a fantastic game, my number 84. My number 83 is the smallest game you're going to see on this top 100. I'm 99% sure it's the smallest game, and that's going to be Sprawlopolis. Sprawlopolis is my number 93, or what, 80, what number am I up to? I'm up to, no, not 90, did I say 90? 83. My number 83, I may have said wrong numbers, I apologize. My number 83 is Sprawlopolis, the only button-shy game on this list, I think. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's the only one. But Sprawlopolis, is it? I think it's the only one on this list. But 83, Sprawlopolis is one of my... It's the game that made me fall in love with Button Shy in the first place, and it's the game that has continued to hold strong. Games come and go. That's part of how it works. At least for me, I experience games, I try games, I like games, and then some games stick around, some games come into my collection temporarily, some games move on. Sprawlopolis, as my first Button Shy game that I fell in love with, is still here. It's still a game. Just yesterday, I played this like 4 times just yesterday, and it's a game I consistently pull out and play. It gives you simple, engaging card overlaying, point scoring optimization, a ton of things to try to think through in this solo puzzle. It has a 2-player mode. I don't recommend it as a 2-player game. I recommend it as a solo game, but it gives you a delightful little experience in a small little wallet game. There are tons of Button Shy games I've come to appreciate since then. Part of this series is Agropolis. There's Naturopolis, which I'd kind of rank in the same place. Arguably, I think Naturopolis is my favorite one, but Sprawlopolis has been the longest standing, so I'm using this as the reference point over there. Agropolis is definitely my least favorite one, that's for sure. I still like it. I still have it, but my least favorite. But then Button Shy has come up with so many games, both solo and non-solo, that have been enjoyable in so many ways. Ancient Realms was just outside my top 100. That's another new one to me, but from them. But like, again, I'm always more mindful of things that are newer versus this game is still here. Years later, 5 years later, I think it is, since I've gotten this game, it is still here. It is still being played. It is still an active participant at my game table, as much as games can be participants at your game table. Sprawlopolis is my number 83 game of all time. My number 82 is going to be another small box game, but not quite as small, and that's going to be That's Pretty Clever, Ganz Schön Clever. This is a roll and write that has stood the test of time for me. There are so many great roll and writes out there, and there are so many that I have fallen in love with in different ways. And there are so many that have captured my attention, sometimes for a longer period of time, sometimes for shorter periods of time. But That's Pretty Clever, to me, is the chaining roll and write that started it all. There are tons of systems out there. There's Three Sisters, there's Fleet the Dice Game, there's Hadrian's Wall, there's Twilight Inscription. There's so many roll and write games that give you combo-tastic goodness. But to me, That's Pretty Clever is the one that started that process. It gave me the first vibes into that world where you check off a box, and you check off another box, and you get that box, and you get this bonus, you take that bonus, and you do this, and what starts off as a puzzle of trying to figure out how you're going to get anything done, by the time you hit the end of the game, you're like, wow, I actually went up a few tracks and had a bit of fun in this little system, and there's 4 more in the system. Well, I guess there are 4 more. There's 2, 3, 4, and then there's That's Pretty Clever for kids as well. This, to me, is roll and write goodness. It is comboing, it's chaining, it's delightful, it's accessible, where other games have, captured my imagination and then sometimes left. I mean, Hadrian's Wall is fantastic, but I got bored of it eventually because a lot of the starting process feels a little more samey. It's a longer experience. Twilight Inscription is absolutely amazing, but I think there's a particular strategy that's a little broken in it that I always pursue and so far win whenever I engage with that, so I kind of stopped playing it. And Three Sisters and Three Sisters, Fleet, and Motor City, those are all absolutely fantastic as well, but ultimately I do find that I still end up resonating more towards That's Pretty Clever, more so than any of those, but they all are fantastic. But That's Pretty Clever, my number 82 of all time. Which brings us to the last game on this list, my 81 and a big box, unfortunately. We have Burncycle, oh my gosh, Burncycle as my number 81 game of all time. Burncycle is a giant box, and it's one of Chip Theory's games that are still on my top 100. In fact, I'm pretty sure last year Chip Theory may have had 4 games in my top 100. This year they have 3. 2 have left, 1 got added, which we'll talk more about later. But Burncycle over here is my number 81 game of all time. This is still an incredibly good experience. It is one of the harder all Chip Theory games can be harder to table. I was gonna say it's harder to table. They're all hard to table. They all require mentally being on top of your game, being on top of the rulebook, understanding how things operate, hopefully playing this on a regular basis. But Burncycle, especially as a solo game, to me absolutely thrives. I'll play this at 2 and really like it. I'll play it at solo and love it. And I'll play it, I will reluctantly play it at 3 players, and I will not play it at 4 players. But Burncycle is stealth-based robot combat within the Chip Theory thing of what they do best. It's got neoprene mats, it's got chips, it's got powers and abilities, it has a ton of things to keep the game variable, a ton of things to keep the game interesting, a hard, complex gameplay that is rewarding, strategic, interesting, engaging, all of those things. It is hard to table. It's this, like, a lot of people have said this is one of the more accessible Chip Theory games, and it's still a hard-to-table game. It's still like a 40-page rulebook with complex decisions, complex interactions. It's not the hardest game to run, to be fair to them. Meaning, if you know the game system, and you're just being a passive actor, you can pick it up pretty quickly if someone else is running everything else for you. But you need a person who understands all the things that are happening. You need a person who understands how the robots activate, the guards, how the bots activate, how all the interaction points work, how each degree of equipment. There's so many things. The network on its own little ping thing. This is a satisfying experience. It's one of my favorite games. I mean, my number 81 favorite game to be specific. That's going to be Burncycle by Chip Theory Games. And that's the next 10 down. The next 10 are down. We will be back on Friday with more of these. We'll be back on Friday with our numbers 80 through 71. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.